BARK Radio.
What's good, everybody? It's Robo from All Bark back on another video, and today with my college football Week 14 picks. It is Rivalry Week, the final week of the regular season, and the final week of Tuesday Maction games. What a year it's been, but before we get into this week's picks, let's go ahead and recap the Week 13 results on the channel. Week 13 was another incredible week for the picks. Picking winners, again, I had a huge win rate going 47-13 there. I had a pretty strong week against the spread as well, going 34-26 to push that season total close to 50 wins above the losses. Hopefully I can have one more green week to end out the regular season above that 50 mark. It's a really fun slate of games on Rivalry Week, but a ton of variance. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into Week 14, starting with Tuesday night action. The first game of Week 14 is an ugly one, Bowling Green at UMass. The loser of this game is officially rock bottom in the MAC this year, and it's got a fitting kickoff time with a 4:30 p.m. start. Nobody really wants to watch this one, as Bowling Green's offense is just really bad this season, and on the other end, UMass would lose to half of the FCS. That's not really a stretch either. I mean, they literally lost to Bryant at home this season. I know UMass covered against Ohio last week, but that game was stopped for weather delays, and Ohio really did not take that game very seriously. They barely even attempted to throw the football at all and just ran the clock. Bowling Green's going to be seeking a win to end their season strong here, and has at least been somewhat competitive. So I've got Bowling Green by 3 scores, 31-13. Our second matchup Tuesday night is a rivalry game in the state of Michigan, as Western Michigan heads to Ypsilanti to take on Eastern. This is a win and in situation for Western Michigan. If they win this game, not only do they take bragging rights for the state title, but they clinch their spot in the MAC title game next week and finish at top of the regular season standings. They're not in for a cakewalk to the title though. This Eastern team has played their best football the past few weeks. The offense is looking sharper, and they're going to want to play spoiler here. It's just hard to see this Western team losing right now. Their only MAC loss was a road game to Miami, Ohio, who has a pretty stout defense, and this EMU team is not on that level. I think they have a big day on the ground and book that MAC title ticket, 30-20. The standalone Thanksgiving game this week is a Group of 5 banger with Navy at Memphis. This should be an incredible matchup with some American Conference title game stakes on the line. Navy with a win has a shot coming down to the other game outcomes, so they should be motivated and ready to roll. The problem could just be the matchup. Memphis is a very good team with a great offense, and we're coming off a bye week to try to get back after back-to-back losses to Tulane and ECU. The problem in both of those losses was their pass defense. They gave up well over 300 passing yards to both Jake Retzlaff and Caton Hauser. But this Navy offense is just built completely different. It's a slightly more favorable matchup for Memphis' defense. I think that's what's going to give them a slight edge here. I'm going to take them close, 34-31. Next up is the Friday slate, and we'll start with a big one in the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss at Mississippi State. This might end up being Lane Kiffin's final game as head coach of the Rebels. We'll know more on his future after this game, but there's been a lot of speculation that he may take another job. That cloud could be hanging over this Ole Miss team and could impact this game really in any way, positive or negative. Mississippi State has been a very competitive team in the SEC this season, and in years where they weren't, this game has still had some close finishes. It's a huge game for both programs, and one I'm expecting to be close again this season, especially with the win meaning a bowl game for Mississippi State. I've become such a fan of Trinidad Chambliss and Kejuan Lacey this season, though. I think it's going to be really hard for the Dogs to stop that Rebel offensive attack late in the game, in my opinion. And I think they do just enough to take the Egg Bowl by a field goal, 31-28. Up next is Utah at Kansas. Utah survived a massive scare from Kansas State last week where they gave up 300 yards to just one player in Joe Jackson. Just an ugly, ugly defensive performance from the Utes, but they still found a way to mount a comeback and pull that game out in the final minutes. They now sit right on the edge of a College World Playoff bid and may need some help to get in, but the most important part is winning this week and winning convincingly. Another poor performance where they squeak by an unranked team and they may miss out no matter what. There is absolutely no reason to expect this offense to not drop 40 or close to it on this Kansas defense. The question is going to be, does the defense actually come to play this week? Jalen Daniels doesn't have a ton of help, and Utah knows what's at stake, so I think they come out strong here and cover, 41-24. Iowa at Nebraska should be a defensive battle in the Big Ten this week, as we all know about these teams' struggles offensively. But it got worse last week as Iowa laid a complete egg against Michigan State and just barely survived a home game there with a late touchdown and field goal in the final seconds. And for Nebraska, they went on the road to Penn State and got absolutely stomped on by Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, but also could not find the end zone, managing just 10 points. They haven't cracked 30 since early October, and this Iowa defense is obviously a great one. I've been impressed with TJ Lateef though, and Nebraska is a very tough place to play. I think this game is low scoring enough to give Nebraska a shot, but Iowa has just been a better team all year. I'll take last week as fluke and think they take this one close, 20-17. Buffalo will again seek bowl eligibility this week as they host the Ohio Bobcats. It has been a really rough year compared to expectations for Buffalo, as Taquan Robertson has just continued to struggle with turnovers week after week, no matter the opponent. Last week they got a matchup against a backup quarterback, and the defense got steamrolled by a freshman, and Robertson threw a few picks again and just never gave Buffalo a real shot. So now they have to go out and beat a better team this week. Parker Navarro, Sia Bangura, and Chase Hendricks are one of the best offensive trios in the MAC, and I just don't see Buffalo's defense being able to stop them often. And although the Ohio defense is not great, the amount of times Buffalo gives the ball up makes it so tough to see them hanging around. Give me Ohio on the road here, 31-20. Kent State at Northern Illinois lost some steam last week as Kent State fell to Central Michigan, marking their 7th loss of the season. If they were seeking bowl eligibility this week, this would have been a massive matchup, but now both these teams will just look to finish their season on a high. Northern Illinois' offense has been awful, but the past 2 weeks has found a little bit of momentum. Against UMass, it was Jalen Macon making a bunch of plays at quarterback, and then last week it was another slow game for the offense, but the ground game didn't do too bad as they rushed for 160 on Western Michigan. That momentum helps a little bit here as Kent State's not as bad as they once were, but still not good at really anything, and it's tough to pick them up on the road against a decent defense. So I'll go NIU here by a touchdown, 24-17. Next is Air Force at Colorado State, 2 teams near the bottom of the Mountain West. This could definitely be a toss-up game that goes either way, as the spread indicates. Both teams have really struggled this season, but more so Colorado State in my opinion. Air Force has had a really tough schedule this season, playing all of Boise State, UNLV, Hawaii, New Mexico, UConn, Army, and Navy this season, and they haven't really looked terrible, whereas Colorado State, they have been absolutely crushed on several occasions this season and got torched on the ground last week at Boise. That's obviously Air Force's bread and butter. Liam Zarka has shown the ability to throw the football as well, but if you can't stop Air Force on the ground, you're in for a long day unless your offense can match it. And Colorado State just has not shown that like other teams did. So like Air Force here, 30-24. Next up is a huge one, the clean, old-fashioned hate game between Georgia and Georgia Tech Friday from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. This was a playoff play-in game for Georgia Tech, but after their Pitt loss, it may just be a huge rivalry game now, as Georgia should be in no matter what, and a 10-2 Tech team would be hoping for a nod still. Regardless of what's at stake though, this rivalry has produced some incredible games, especially last year's 8 OT thriller. This year, Tech's team is better, but the same can be said about Georgia right now, as Gunnar Stockton's just looks so good, and they've been dominant besides the Alabama game. I think we're in for a banger, and it comes down to Georgia's defense being able to limit Haynes King on the ground. But after watching Pitt's offense rip through this Tech D, I find it hard to believe Georgia won't as well, or at least late in this game. I think Georgia wins this one by a score because of that defensive advantage, 34-27. Back to the Mountain West, we've got a big one with San Diego State heading to New Mexico. There's a ton at stake here, as San Diego State is in the Mountain West title with a win, and New Mexico is in with a win and a Boise State loss. This game comes down to the matchup for me. San Diego State's defense has been exceptional, but New Mexico's also been pretty stout against the run. Both teams giving up just over 100 yards per game on the ground, and that may give New Mexico a slight advantage as their offense is a little more balanced. San Diego State really wants to run the football. They got a mobile quarterback and a stud next to him in Lucky Sutton. But if they can't run the ball consistently, it might be tough to score enough to win this one on the road, kind of like that Hawaii game. That's what separates New Mexico here for me, and I'm going to take them as a slight dog at home, 23-20. North Texas has a big game this week as a win puts them in the mix for the American Conference title, needing some tiebreaker help. And the opponent this week is Temple. Temple's been competitive at times this year, but has also really gotten crushed in a couple of their big games this season. They need a win this week to secure bowl eligibility, and although that's very unlikely to happen, they'll definitely believe they can do it as they nearly upset Navy earlier this season and beat UTSA. This North Texas offense is the best they've seen though. They're dropping 50 left and right, and this week probably won't be any exception unless they're up big and rest guys. I just think with North Texas's defense giving up a lot to some bad offenses this year, Temple may be competent enough to score a few touchdowns and cover a big spread, so I'm going to go with a 45-28 final for North Texas. Boise State still has Mountain West hopes alive this week, even without Maddox Madsen. They are just a win over Utah State and a New Mexico loss away from clinching a title game appearance once again this season. This Utah State team will be a really tough matchup for them though, especially going on the road. They've been a very good offense basically all season, both home and road, but have not lost a home game yet, and are coming back from a pretty impressive 2-game trip where they took UNLV to overtime and beat Fresno State by double digits. I've been riding this team all season, and they've come through. Boise's rushing attack is going to be a battle, though. I think what gives Utah State the edge, though, is the quarterback play. Cutfirth looked good last week, but against an awful opponent for Boise, I don't see him matching that on the road here. Give me Bryson Barnes and Utah State as a home dog, 30-27. Indiana looks to lock up their Big Ten title trip this week as they go on the road against their hated in-state rival Purdue. This is maybe as far apart as these two teams have been talent and ranking-wise in a long time, and this spread's sitting all the way up at 4 touchdowns. Purdue has been competitive in some games this year, covering against both Ohio State and Michigan, but they've also had some games where they got curb stomped like Washington and Northwestern. This game means the most to them, but Indiana has just torched some teams this year. Even their backups have been scoring against the bottom of the Big Ten, and I expect nothing less here. Purdue does not have the defensive ability of a Wisconsin to hold Indiana to just 31. I'd be surprised if the Hoosiers didn't flirt with 50 against the rival. I'm going to go with a 45-13 final. Now over to the SEC, we've got an absolute banger this week as number 3 Texas A&M heads to Austin to take on the Longhorns. It's a simple situation for A&M. Win the game and you're in the SEC title. And for the Longhorns, I'm sure there's nothing they love more to upset their rival at home and knock them out of an SEC championship game. A&M's been a wagon for me all season, but this might be their toughest matchup yet. Texas is starting to look pretty good offensively, especially Arch Manning. Besides the Georgia game, I really like what I've seen out of him late in this year. A&M's defense is very good and that pass rush is strong, but Texas is going to give this game everything they have and still have lost just 1 game at home since 2022. And A&M's comeback win against South Carolina was massive, but made them seem pretty beatable. Same goes for Arkansas on the road earlier. This is a tough pick, but I'm going to roll with Texas to keep the home streak alive by a field goal, 27-24. Our final Friday matchup is another in-state rivalry and another good one with Arizona at Arizona State. Both these teams have had up and down years, but Arizona has really come on late in this season, especially offensively, taking down Cincinnati on the road and beating Baylor last week. And for Arizona State, they've dealt with a ton of injuries, but got Jordan Tyson back last week. He made an impact, but it was the run game that just torched Colorado. And this team also beat Iowa State on the road without Tyson and Leavitt, so still a very competitive team, and a defense is going to make Arizona work. This game probably comes down to the turnover battle and Jeff Sims playing a clean game. I think it's a complete toss-up I would love not to pick, but just from a defensive standpoint, I favor the Sun Devils, and I think Tyson being healthier could be huge. I'll take him at home as a dog, 30-27. The game is yet again a high-stakes matchup as Michigan will look to extend their streak to 5 in a row and put themselves in the college football playoffs, and Ohio State looks to finally beat Michigan for the first time since 2019. Ohio State's been the far better team this season, especially defensively, but we all know how much this game means to both teams, and it's got a long history of close games. And as young as this Michigan team is, a lot of their close games come with great performances that end close because of mental mistakes and turnovers. But what's kind of impressive to me is how they're arguably a top 12 team in the country in a lot of advanced metrics. I definitely think this team has a shot, but it's going to take a complete game. The young guys and coaches cannot waste scoring opportunities. They can't have missed field goals and blown tackles. Their odds get more realistic if Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are limited. If they go, obviously I love their matchup against the secondary, but I'm expecting another battle where Michigan pulls out everything they have. I just can't pick against Ohio State with that defense and how young this Michigan team is. I'm going to take them by a touchdown, assuming both Tate and Smith play, 24-17. Texas Tech should lock up a Big 12 title game appearance this week as they hit the road at West Virginia. It's a West Virginia team that's very improved from early on in the year, but still is very outmatched in this game. Tech was one of my top teams in the country early, and after BYU, I really think this team has a chance to go deep in the playoffs. This defense is incredible, especially the front seven. Jacob Rodriguez is a legitimate Heisman candidate and might score another touchdown this week to add to the resume. My pause with this game, though, is the resting aspect. Once this game is in hand, I'd be surprised if Tech ran out the starters for long. And this West Virginia team has been solid on both ends lately. They nearly upset TCU, beat Houston on the road, took Arizona State to the final seconds, and had 2 weeks of prep for this game. I think this one could reek of a backdoor cover, and 24.5 points is a lot on the road in this spot. I'm going to go with a 41-20 final. Miami at Pitt is a game with playoff implications for Miami and a game with ACC title implications if either SMU or Virginia were to lose Saturday night. The winner of this game will backdoor their way to the ACC title if either loss happens. Pitt looked incredibly impressive last week on the road at Georgia Tech. They really dominated that first half and never let up after Georgia Tech's comeback attempt. The offense looks so good, led by freshman Mason Heinschel, and the defense has been great against the run all year. It's a different story for the secondary, which I think Miami could be able to exploit with their weapons, and Carson Beck looking as sharp as ever last week. I think this game goes down to the wire, and Pitt gives Miami an incredible game at home, but Miami's defense comes through in the final moments, making a huge playoff statement on the road, 27-24. Baylor will play for bowl eligibility this week as they host Houston. It's been a super rough season for Baylor, who entered the year with some Big 12 hopes and a little bit of playoff smoke, but the defense has been so terrible this season they now sit at 5-6. A shame for a guy like Sawyer Robertson, who's been so good the past 2 seasons and put up some incredibly strong numbers. But on the bright side, I mentioned last week that this Houston team did not deserve to be ranked and had a pretty unimpressive watch this year. And I was right to take TCU last week as a road dog. This is another similar game where I really trust Baylor to score. Houston's defense is not good enough to slow down Baylor to me, and I actually think this Houston offense is average enough to think Baylor might actually get some stops here. Similar to the UCF game, but more competent offense. Give me Baylor 34-28. Rivalry week continues here with Kentucky heading to Louisville, and these two teams kind of heading in opposite directions. In recent weeks, Kentucky has upset Auburn and blown out Florida, giving them some bowl hopes. They did get blown out by Vandy last week, but on the other side, Louisville's had it rough, looking like a completely different team since Miami, losing each of their last 3 to Cal, Clemson, and SMU. They're now down their top 2 backs in Isaac and Kewan Brown, and the offense is dead. So I think Kentucky has a real shot to pull off the upset this week and make a bowl. I've been pretty low on the Wildcats this year, but Cutter Bully's been solid lately, and that Vandy matchup was super tough. I just get the sense they really want this one, and Louisville looks super vulnerable. I'm taking Kentucky on the road to get it done, 23-20. Clemson at South Carolina is the next rivalry matchup we'll go over. Clemson comes in this game rolling after beating Florida State and then Louisville on the road and Furman on senior day. And even before that, they were playing better football as they should have beaten Duke as well. South Carolina can say the same technically as they blew a 30-3 lead to Texas A&M, but even having that was impressive. And they continued it by destroying Coastal Carolina last week. Regardless, this game is just a bragging rights matchup as no bowls on the line, and that honestly makes me favor Clemson here as just a better football team. Lenora Sellers is a great playmaker, and we're seeing this offense break out a bit, but this Clemson defense has a ton of NFL talent and a front seven that should dominate this O-line, similar to how A&M did in that second half. And the Tiger offense has been on a tear. Klubnik is playing good football, and I still have this Clemson team edging this one out, 24-21. Kansas State got maybe their best offensive performance of the season last week as they nearly upset Utah. Considering the level of opponent, that was incredibly impressive. Joe Jackson rushing for 300 yards and very nearly pulling off a huge upset. This week, they'll have a much easier opponent taking on Colorado at home, and given Colorado's run defense this season, especially late, they might be able to replicate that performance on the ground as a team. My question here lies with the defense. Kansas State hasn't really shut down many offenses this year besides Oklahoma State and Kansas, two teams who really lack weapons and firepower. Colorado is really bad, but has some great receivers and have scored around 20 points each of the last 3 weeks. If they do that here, I think they'll have a chance to cover a 3-score spread. I'm going to go with a 38-24 final as K-State reaches the bowl game. Next is Iowa State at Oklahoma State. This is another pretty big mismatch for Oklahoma State. They've played well recently, keeping some games within the spread line, but this line is definitely feeling like a little short to me. Iowa State has not had a great season, a lot due to injury, especially on the defensive side of the ball, but they are still a much better team than Oklahoma State and just beat TCU on the road, so I don't expect this environment to bother them considering it is much less intimidating than TCU. The Oklahoma State defense has played a lot better, but I just don't really see them scoring many points here. They managed a 6 on K-State and 14 to UCF. I think Iowa State's going to be a really tough match for them to score on, and they've got a decent run game that can grind out drives for points. So I'm taking the Cyclones this week, 31-13. East Carolina's playoff hopes are completely dead now after last week's blowout loss at UTSA. And not only that, but also their American title hopes. And this week they've got a tough matchup on the road against FAU. This FAU team has struggled, but they've got an offense that can sling it and put up a ton of points. They just took UConn to the brink and have consistently scored close to 30 and up on the best teams in the conference. I expect nothing different here, even considering ECU's defense has been good for most of the year. I just think this is a rough spot going on the road with hopes crushed, but ECU is still a very good team and should want to finish the year strong. FAU's defense is a problem as well, so I won't take the upset, but I'm expecting this to be a shootout. I'll go with ECU close, 38-34. Toledo goes to Central Michigan this week, potentially in a win-and-in scenario if Ohio loses to Buffalo Friday night. They'll know if this game is for a title shot or not early, but regardless, I think Toledo takes this game. Central Michigan's offense was super run-heavy early in the year, but has transitioned to more of a balanced one with Levis back at quarterback. And they bring Marcus Beeman in at quarterback to run the football pretty often, but that's not something I think you can do on this Toledo defense. It's the best in the conference by a mile and one of the best in all the Group of 5, and the offense has absolutely dominated the past several weeks as well, which is huge for giving them a potential title chance. I'm just having a really hard time seeing the Toledo team lose. I think it's one they should handle and pull away in the second half, so I'm going to take Toledo here, 31-17. Miami, Ohio will know whether or not this is a MAC title play-in game for them before kick, but as it stands right now, they are in the MAC title with a win over Ball State this week and a loss from any of Buffalo, Toledo, or Western Michigan. So I'd fully expect Miami Ohio to be ramped up and ready to go this week at home. The issue for me is the spread. 3 scores is a lot in the MAC unless you are absolutely one of the top teams. And although this Miami Ohio team is good, they're without their starting quarterback, Daquan Finn. It didn't matter last week as they rolled over Buffalo after forcing a bunch of turnovers and a freshman balled out, but I need to see that performance replicated before believing in a new quarterback. I think Miami Ohio's offense could struggle a bit here, but it won't be enough to lose. 30-16 is my final. Next up is UCF at BYU. UCF is playing for a bowl berth here, but it's a very unlikely one as they really are just not a great team, and BYU is a playoff contender playing for a Big 12 title berth. A win here, and they are in at home on senior night. This team is so well coached, and I have no doubts they'll be geared up and focused to smash UCF early so they can get on to next week against likely Texas Tech and fight for a playoff spot there. And unlike some other games, I think this may not be enough points. I don't hate UCF's defense. I think they can hold BYU a little bit, but I really don't see where the offense comes from at all here until late in the game against backups. This UCF team just can't score, and BYU's defense has been elite this season outside of Texas Tech. I think they jump on them early and don't let up, 34-13. Delaware will look for win number 6 this week, but it'll be without a lock for bowl eligibility as they are in their first year of being an FBS team, and like I've talked about before, the transition phase makes them ineligible for postseason play unless there's not enough qualified teams with 6 wins. I definitely think that factor still gears them up to play though, as there's a real shot it does happen, but also this Delaware team has been pretty competitive this season offensively, and this matchup against UTEP's defense is pretty favorable. UTEP's offense has found life lately with Locklear and Odom running the show, but I don't really see them stopping Minicucci and Delaware here on the road. I think they grab that 6th win and give themselves a shot at a postseason berth, 35-24. We'll stay in the Conference USA with FIU at Sam Houston next. This is another mismatched game, but a bigger one than the last. Sam Houston is a very bad team. I say it every week, but it's true. And last week I added to that as they let Middle Tennessee pull away from them and hand them yet another loss. That's just a bad team they weren't overly competitive with, and this FIU team is coming off of a big win over Jacksonville State. It's a game Jacksonville State probably should have won, but blew. But regardless, FIU has taken down some of the top teams in the conference this year and has a genuine pulse on both sides of the football. But more importantly, the offense. Sam Houston is probably going to get gashed all game here, and I don't see them being able to match that production at all. I'll go 34-17 FIU. Georgia Southern at Marshall should be a pretty high-scoring affair in the Sun Belt this week. Both teams are playing for a bowl bid, sitting at 5-6 each this season, and neither team has shown to be reliable at all on the defensive end. While it's the exact opposite for the offenses, Georgia Southern can run all over bad defenses and has even scored 30+ on some of the better teams in the Sun Belt. And Marshall can say the same, as they even have a win over Old Dominion this season. And as fluke as that game was, it's an opponent that blew out Georgia Southern last week. Getting this game at home also gives Marshall an edge, but I fully expect a battle here as both teams fight for that 6th win to end the season. It's just when I see Marshall taken by a score. I think they've just shown a bit more defensive competence this year, so I'll go 37-30 Marshall. Back to the Conference USA, we've got a huge one this week as Western Kentucky travels down to Jacksonville State. This is a battle of 2 top teams in the conference. The winner goes to the conference title. If it's Jacksonville State, they'll get to host, and if it's Western Kentucky, I believe it comes down to a tiebreaker scenario. But nonetheless, I'm expecting a great game between both teams fighting for that title spot. Jacksonville State is coming off a tough loss at FIU where they blew a lead and couldn't regain it late. And Western Kentucky just played LSU extremely tough, giving up just 13 points in a 3-point loss after a late defensive touchdown. It was a super impressive performance, but one that may be more indicative of LSU's offensive problems more. And this Jacksonville State team has been so good at home this year. No losses, and recently a 2-score win over a good Kennesaw State team. I'm going to trust them at home again this week in a spot where everyone's probably taking Western Kentucky, 28-24. Next, again in the Conference USA, we've got a good matchup. Nothing on the line here, though, between Louisiana Tech and Missouri State. I thought a lot about this game and have really been sold on Missouri State here. Louisiana Tech just made an incredible comeback win over Liberty, scoring 4 straight touchdowns in the second half to win in overtime. But a lot of that was off of the Liberty turnovers. 4 interceptions allowed them back into that game, and it was just a complete meltdown. This Missouri State team has not looked like a team capable of that display at all this season. Their only losses this year are to USC, SMU, Western Kentucky, and Kennesaw State last week in overtime. So it's been a phenomenal year for them, and at home, just the 1 close loss to Western Kentucky. I think they're the better and healthier team here. Give me Missouri State, 24-20. Now back to the Sun Belt. Old Dominion gets another chance to dominate to end the regular season on a high note before a bowl game as they host Georgia State. This Georgia State team has 1 win on the year, and they will not be picking up a second this week. The question is, can Old Dominion cover a near a 4-spread touchdown? And quite honestly, with the way they've been playing lately, I think they can fairly easily. It's senior night for ODU, and they're absolutely rolling. Their last 3 games, they've given up 6, 0, and 10 points and scored 30+ in all 3, including 45 last week to Georgia Southern on the road. That's just a better team than Georgia State by a pretty wide margin, and I think this should be a cakewalk to the finish for ODU. I'll take them to win and cover, 41-10. Arkansas State heads to Appalachian State with bowl hopes on the line for both teams sitting on 5 wins. This should be a great matchup, and one that's pretty tough to evaluate as both teams have had a lot of ups and downs. But Arkansas State to me has performed on a more consistent level. They're coming off back-to-back close losses to 2 tougher teams in Southern Miss and Louisiana. But before that, they picked up some really quality wins over Texas State, South Alabama, Georgia Southern, and Troy. I think this is a proven solid team, and I can't really say the same for App State. When the offense is cooking, they're tough to beat, but App State has had some really ugly performances this year, and they escaped Marshall by the skin of their teeth last week. I think Arkansas State is a tougher opponent and reaches bowl eligibility on the road, 28-23. Boston College at Syracuse is a true bottom-of-the-barrel matchup in the ACC this week. It's been a disaster of a season for Cuse without Steve Angeli. Both of these teams showed a little promise early, but Boston College is sitting at 1-10, and Syracuse has lost 7 straight, and it hasn't even been competitive in a single one of those games. They just have zero offense without a quarterback who can complete a forward pass, and now their running back room is banged up. Last week they gave up 70 points to Notre Dame as the defense has gone from bad to disgusting, and while Boston College is 1-10, they've at least shown some fight. They hung with Notre Dame, hung with Louisville, hung with Georgia Tech, and shown signs of promise. This is the week that they should finally get into the win column. Cuse is just that inept right now. BC takes this one 26-20. New Mexico State hosts Middle Tennessee this week. Both these teams coming off of wins. A great feeling for Middle Tennessee as they hadn't seen a win since week 3 at Nevada, and New Mexico State snapping a 5-game losing streak. Both of these teams are bad, but I think Middle Tennessee is considerably worse. Their defense has been getting 40 and 50 put on them left and right, and the win they just picked up was at home against a garbage Sam Houston team. New Mexico State, despite the losses, has fallen by a touchdown or less 3 times in conference play, and all against the better teams in the conference. Not to mention, last week's win was at UTEP, just a better team than Sam Houston. I don't see them dropping this one on senior night either. Give me New Mexico State by a touchdown, 31-24. Louisiana is another team fighting for bowl eligibility this week, and they'll do so in a favorable matchup as they'll play in the Battle on the Bayou this week at home against rivals Louisiana Monroe. They put themselves in this position last week with a huge win over Arkansas State and on the road as well, which is pretty impressive. That was an incredible game to watch and went down to the final play where Arkansas State fell a yard short. But Louisiana just now needs a win and they're into the postseason. ULM has been a god-awful offense all year long and has lost 7 straight. The defense has not been the problem. It's been scored on, but they aren't getting hammered. It's the offense's inability to move the football that's caused the awful season, and this Louisiana team is surging. 3 straight impressive wins, and soon to be 4. Louisiana wins here, 35-20. Another Sun Belt team looking to get to a bowl this week is Texas State. It's been a weird year for Texas State. They got off to a great 3-1 start and then lost 5 straight with some disgusting defensive play. The past 2 games they've won over a very solid Southern Miss team, and last week they handled ULM. This matchup with South Alabama is going to be tougher. Probably similar to that Southern Miss game a bit, as this is a competent offense that can exploit just how bad Texas State's defense can be. But on the other end, it's a matchup they should win, as I really don't see South Alabama being able to stop this offense. They're averaging over 200 yards a game on the ground. The weakness of South Alabama's D, and I think that's what sways this game in Texas State's favor, but I'm expecting a closer game than the last 2. I'll go 38-31 final. Tulsa is hosting UAB this week, looking to finish the season with their 3rd consecutive win, and the easiest of the 3 as they've beaten Oregon State and then Army on the road the last 2 weeks, and this UAB team is abysmal, especially on the defensive end. Nobody's really been able to slow down Tulsa's run game led by Dominic Richardson, and considering how bad UAB's been there, I think he's in for a massive day on the ground here, as Tulsa can just run all over this defense. This Tulsa team would no doubt be bowl-bound this year if it weren't for a loaded schedule. They had to play all of Navy, Tulane, Memphis, ECU, and FAU this season. Just some great teams in the conference and great offenses. This is the complete opposite of those matchups, and one I would expect a well-coached Tulsa team to run all over. I'm going 38-27 final. Over to some bigger games kicking off at 3:30. Oregon at Washington's first as the Ducks look to lock up their playoff spot this week against a huge rival. Oregon's coming off a pretty convincing win over USC where the defense did its job and the offense was just rolling. This week is arguably an easier matchup, but one that can get a little scary as playing at Washington is never fun, especially for Oregon as this rivalry means a lot. Washington's coming off a dominant win on the road over UCLA, and now we see how much they've grown this year as they have not fared well against the best teams in the Big Ten. Ohio State and Michigan dumped on them, and they even slipped up at Wisconsin a few weeks ago. In my opinion, I think this is another game where Washington struggles to score consistently, and the defense can't really get off the field enough. I've got Oregon by double digits on the road, 30-20. LSU at Oklahoma could be a great defensive matchup, one that looked like it meant more early on in the year, but since, this LSU team has completely fallen apart and almost got upset by Western Kentucky last week. It took almost an entire half for LSU to get on the board, and they still managed just 1 offensive touchdown and a 3-point win over a Conference USA team. Michael Van Buren did not look good, and I think it's clear Nuss wasn't really the main problem with this offense. This LSU team is just bad on that end and really reliant on their defense to keep them in games. It might happen here for a while as Oklahoma's offense has been pretty rough as well, but they're looking better, and Oklahoma is firmly in the playoffs right now with 3 straight ranked wins. This is my number 2 defense in all of college football. I struggle to see LSU scoring points here. I'm going 24-10 final for Oklahoma. Vanderbilt at Tennessee is next up in the SEC with playoff implications on the line for both teams. Tennessee has 3 losses, but still finds themselves ranked in the top 20 as all 3 were to playoff teams, and a win over Vanderbilt would definitely give them somewhat of a case if teams in front of them lose. And for Vandy, a win and they are in my opinion, as a road ranked win is a big booster, and the time will tell if that happens. As for the winner of this game, I think it's really a toss-up. One I've struggled to pick, honestly. Fading Diego Pavia is so hard this season as he's taken Vandy to new heights. But Tennessee just looks so solid some weeks. Even lately they hung with Oklahoma and just dominated Florida in the swamp. They're a good team at home typically as well, and I can't firmly say Vandy is the better team here. So give me Tennessee close, 31-27. Staying in the SEC one more time in the 3:30 slate, we've got Missouri at Arkansas. Missouri got Bo Pribula back last week, which I was not expecting, but it didn't matter much as Oklahoma still won and covered the spread. The game went pretty much exactly how I imagined it. Missouri struggling to throw the ball without turning it over, and absolutely zero room for Ahmad Hardy to run against just an elite defensive front 7. Mateer struggled against this Missouri team too, and it did not matter. This is a much more favorable matchup for Missouri though, especially Ahmad Hardy. Arkansas cannot stop anything defensively and hasn't won a single game in SEC play. Even Pribula should have a day here, but I would guess Hardy gets a big workload and dominates, and Missouri's defense does enough to win on the road, 34-28. We've got an Axe battle this week with Wisconsin heading to Minnesota. A couple weeks ago, I firmly believed the Axe would be staying in Minnesota, but lately Wisconsin looks like a competitive team finally. From a matchup standpoint, Minnesota's secondary has a huge advantage as Wisconsin cannot throw the football down the field at all. But the Minnesota run defense has been pretty bad this season, and that's exactly what Wisconsin's been doing lately. They've thrown some wrinkles in the run game as well to mix it up, but the big difference has been the step the defense has taken. They held Indiana to 31 a week after beating Washington, and just took down Illinois without a sweat last week as well. This team is feeling it right now, and Minnesota just lost to Northwestern. That's 3 out of 4 now with a lone win, a 3-point win over Michigan State. I think Wisconsin's looked sharper and better lately, so I'll take them to get the Axe back on the road, 23-20. Penn State and Rutgers both battle for win number 6 this week from Piscataway, New Jersey. Penn State's completely flipped their season back around after the Aller injury and Franklin firing made them look like a corpse, but lately they've refound themselves and remembered the amount of NFL talent they have on that roster. Back-to-back blowout wins over MSU and Nebraska give them 5 now, and it comes a week after very narrowly falling to number 2 Indiana in the final seconds, and hanging with Ohio State for most of the game the week prior. The ground game is back in rhythm, with Allen and Singleton finally getting back to their old selves, and the defense has just been suffocating the past 2 weeks. This Rutgers offense has some talented weapons, but it's another team they can absolutely roll over. I'm not going to fade them right now. Give me Penn State 35-20. Next up is Duke hosting Wake Forest. This Duke team is about as frustrating as it gets. I've lost a lot of picks taking Duke this season, both to cover or win it, and it doesn't even matter. And last week, they finally came through for me in the final minutes. When I don't pick them, they pull off a miracle. When I do pick them, they turn it over like crazy. Just an insane year for a pretty talented team, honestly. And this Wake team is no slouch either. I was shocked when I saw that Delaware spread at just 17 last week, and it was honestly my favorite pick of the week, and was covered basically in the first quarter. This Duke team is not Delaware, though. They probably won't have as many explosive plays here. This is on the road as well. Duke's offense can be so good when it's on, and they'll need to be on here. I'm going to take them at home to get it done again close, 30-27. Next should be another great game, this time in the Big 12 with Cincinnati at TCU. TCU's another frustrating team who's taken some bad losses or struggled to cover where they should have this season, but they finally got it done for me last week as I picked them to upset Houston outright on the road, and they did. It was an ugly game, but this defense came through finally. This week's a much tougher matchup with Cincinnati, although it is at home. Brennan Sorsby impressed me last week as Cincinnati did not look too bad hanging around with BYU for most of that game. He looked healthy enough to run with the ball and move around in the pocket and had a pretty strong day considering the opponent. This TCU defense can force turnovers, but it's just not the same unit as BYU. I think Cincy scores a bit more this week, but the same goes for TCU. I'll take him at home on Senior Day close, 33-30. Kennesaw State has a win and in scenario in the Conference USA this week as they go on the road to face Liberty. Kennesaw State has been so impressive in the second year in the FBS, making quick work of most of their conference, going 6-1 to this point, with the only loss coming on the road to Jacksonville State, who's at the top of their standing right now. This matchup with Liberty could be tough, but Liberty's coming off of 3 straight losses. All 3 are decent teams in the Conference USA, but Ethan Vasco has become super unreliable at quarterback. He blew the game last week against Louisiana Tech, throwing 4 picks despite having a 3-touchdown lead. Not only do I think Kennesaw's defense can take the ball away, but their offense has been rolling all throughout this conference, and Liberty's defense is not the greatest by any means. So give me Kennesaw on the road, 30-23. Southern Miss hosts Troy this week for the Sun Belt West Championship, as the winner will take on James Madison in the title game next week. Southern Miss has had 2 chances in a row to lock up this division, but got blown out by Texas State without Braxton at quarterback. And then even with him back last week, they lost a road game to South Alabama. I still believe in this team a lot though, as it took a lot to get to this point for them, and Charles Huff is a great coach. But this Troy team is genuinely decent. They're 5-2 in the conference. The 2 losses coming to Old Dominion and Arkansas State, both who are good teams. I think this is the game they can hang around and make Southern Miss work for it, especially with what's on the line. But I gotta trust Southern Miss to get back in the win column this week and secure their spot in the title at home. 31-28. Army will play for a bowl bid this week on the road at UTSA, and it's probably going to be a very tough task this week as UTSA has looked so good in most of their recent games. They got blown out by North Texas and South Florida, but destroyed Tulane and East Carolina at home, a place they're clearly more comfortable playing at. And considering this is again a home game against Army, a team who has not had an offense basically all year and hasn't really looked good or played a complete game this season against a decent opponent outside of Kansas State early and maybe a closer game against Tulane, I think the theme of UTSA being way better at home continues this week as they spoil Army's bowl hopes, 35-23. James Madison has already clinched their division in the Sun Belt and will go on the road this week at Coastal Carolina. Really just looking to stay healthy and finishing the season undefeated in conference play and strengthen that playoff resume. This Coastal team has actually been pretty solid this season despite me being lower on them to enter the year. The offense really turned a corner midseason. They've been pretty solid at home. In fact, their last 2 losses were both road games to Georgia Southern and South Carolina. This matchup with James Madison probably won't be fun, but also might be a step back from the South Carolina team they just played. Not to mention, there's a chance James Madison rests some players at some point in this game when it's in hand, as they have bigger and better things to worry about with what's already been clinched. I think JMU rolls in this game, but it won't be enough to cover a near 4-score spread. I'm going to take JMU here 34-17. Florida State's bowl hopes are on the line this week on the road in the Swamp at in-state rival Florida. This Florida team has had such a disappointing season with an absolutely loaded schedule. Some games they show up to and compete, and some others they lay down and just get killed. Last week was one of those as they just got dominated by Tennessee at home. What gives me some faith in this game though is that Florida State is not Tennessee. As a matter of fact, they're pretty awful on the road this season. They haven't won a single game on the road yet with losses to Virginia, Stanford, Clemson, and NC State. Florida is not a good team, but I would definitely take them to beat Stanford and NC State. 2 teams Florida State couldn't beat on the road, and I think Florida will be amped up for this game as it is a rival, and they shut down Florida State's bowl hopes, 27-24. We get the Oregon State-Washington State rematch this week, this time from Pullman, as Washington State will look to get their get back after losing to this team on the road a few weeks ago. It's a result that really makes no sense looking back. Since that game, Oregon State's lost to Sam Houston at home and Tulsa on the road by 3 scores. And the games surrounding that loss for Washington State are a close loss to Ole Miss, a close loss to Virginia, a win over Toledo, a blowout win over Louisiana Tech, and a close road loss to James Madison, a potential Group of 5 playoff contender. At this point, I'm fully expecting Washington State to win this game handily. I just can't take Oregon State to do anything seeing as how they've played so bad the past few weeks. And this one's in Pullman. I'm going to take Washington State here big, 31-13. Virginia is playing for an ACC title berth this week against in-state rival Virginia Tech. It's a game they absolutely have to have, but one I also expect them to have as they just have been so much better this season. There's been some near hiccups, including North Carolina, Washington State, and even Cal for a while. And when Chandler Morris missed the Wake Forest game, they lost outright at home. But with him back 2 weeks ago, they dominated Duke on the road in impressive fashion. He's now gotten another week to get healthier, and this team had 2 weeks of prep time for a big game this week. Virginia Tech looked pretty good last week in the loss to Miami, only losing that one by 17 and it being a bit closer for a while, but this team hasn't been overly competitive for most of the year, and even in recent weeks outside the Miami game. I think with what's on the line for Virginia, and the James Franklin hype getting out of the way, the Cavs roll onto the ACC title, 34-20. Maryland and Michigan State face off this week from Detroit at Ford Field, so a road game for Maryland, but technically a neutral game as it isn't at Spartan Stadium either. Michigan State put together their best performance in a while last week as they nearly upset Iowa and Kinnick, but they fell short once again and are still winless in the Big Ten. It's been as bad a year as it can get for Jonathan Smith and the Spartans, but this is a real chance to add a win this week as Maryland also has only 1 win in the Big Ten and hasn't been overly competitive either. But their offense has actually had a bit of a pulse this season. I like what I saw to Malik Washington last week against Michigan, and this Michigan State defense is pretty bad. It was solid last week, but we all know about Iowa's offense. I think Maryland may be due for a breakout here, and I just cannot trust Michigan State to pick one up. I need more than last week to say they are improving, so I'll take Maryland in Detroit, 28-23. South Florida wraps up the regular season with a home game against Rice. Rice will be hoping to pull off an upset to reach a bowl game here, but it's an absolute long shot as they enter this game 4 touchdown underdogs and virtually no way to stop this South Florida offense. Byron Brown and company may be eliminated from playoff and American contention, but they can still hang 50 on anyone in this conference and may do so again here. And on the other side of the ball, the South Florida defense is pretty underrated. They're on the field a lot considering how fast this offense can score, but it's pretty much dominated its weaker competition this season in FAU and UAB most recently. This Rice offense is extremely run heavy, and that's just not going to work much against this team to me. I think it's one South Florida dominates and wins by 30 plus. I'll go 52-21. On to the Iron Bowl, a massive game for both Auburn and Alabama. Auburn looking for win number 6 and a chance to knock their rival out of the playoffs. And Alabama obviously looking to make the SEC title and stay in the playoffs with a road win here in one of the biggest rivalries in the sport. Better Alabama teams have gone up against worse Auburn ones and either lost or been taken to the brink. So this is no walk in the park for the Tide, especially considering how talented this Auburn defense is and the kind of playmakers they have at receiver if they can actually get them the football. It looks like Ashton Daniels will get the start over Deuce Knight after his strong debut against Mercer. Alabama would have been an absolute massive second start to make, but honestly, I'm just not a Daniels fan at all. I wouldn't have minded going with Knight here, and honestly, as much voodoo as Jordan Hare has, I don't trust this Auburn team to win this game with how they finished games this season. I'm taking Bama by a touchdown, 27-20. One of the best jersey matchups in the sport comes with UCLA and USC, but it's a pretty big mismatch in talent and execution against this season, as USC enters a 3-touchdown favorite. I've said quite a bit how much I like this offense. I am sky high on Mekhi Lemon for the NFL draft and a big fan of Jacoby Lane as well. But Jaden Mayava is a sleeper at quarterback, and I love what I've seen from freshman King Miller in that backfield. It would have been a big help if USC was healthier in the secondary last week to compete more with Oregon. But now with the playoffs hope shot, the full focus turns to the ending the season right over their crosstown rival. And I really just don't see how UCLA is going to get stops here. They got dominated by a banged-up Washington team at home. This is a better offense in my opinion, and a game might be surprised if it ends close. I'm taking USC 45-17. Tulane is still alive in the American and the likely conference title favorite as they are currently the highest ranked by the playoff committee, which helps with tiebreakers. And this week they've got a freebie with Charlotte coming to town, easily one of the worst, if not the worst team in the American. Georgia didn't even try against them last week and held a 28-point lead in the first half, which is something a lot of these AAC teams can do. North Texas and South Florida have hung huge days against this defense, and with Tulane knowing they need to impress the committee one more time, I'd be surprised if they weren't running up the score a little bit here. And while Charlotte's not the worst offense, I still don't see many points coming here. Tulane's defense hasn't been great, but it's talented enough that needs a blowout. And I think they get it, 45-13. The final Big Ten matchup of the week is Northwestern at Illinois. It's been a pretty disappointing season for the Illini this year, sitting at 7-4 after coming into the year believing they had some playoff hopes. They just got beat pretty handily by Wisconsin, and the offense looked awful, and now this game becomes important to finish off the season right. Another loss with what they're losing this offseason will draw a ton of questions about the program's future. And this Northwestern team is very solid. They're coming off a gritty win over Minnesota last week. And just a couple weeks ago, they took advantage of mental errors by Michigan and nearly pulled off that upset. I just trust Illinois at home to send the seniors outright. Last week was bad, but this is still a team who's handled the bottom half of this conference for the most part. I'll take the Illini, 31-21. Next up in Rivalry Week is UNC at NC State. Not the greatest matchup this year, but still potentially a good one as both teams have had some huge up and downs this season. North Carolina's had a little midseason run where they looked pretty solid, and just last week they barely lost to Duke, which was some good fight to see. And NC State's pulled off some upsets over Georgia Tech and Florida State to reach a bowl this year. But the season has been pretty rough still as they've just been uncompetitive in some other games, and the defense has looked terrible until last week. But one game against a bad Florida State team who can't win on the road isn't going to change my mind on their defense. North Carolina's offense struggles, but it's a solid matchup, and on the other end, the UNC defense hasn't been bad. I think this is going to be a close game, but it's one I'd trust CJ Bailey to pull out at home. I'll go 28-23 NC State. Now on to a real classic Atlantic Coast Conference matchup. We've got SMU heading out to Cal. A win here puts SMU in the ACC title game, so this is a huge road game for the Mustangs, but they cannot sleep on this Cal team. For starters, SMU's not been good on the road this season. Outside of Clemson without Klubnik, they straight up lost to Wake Forest and also failed to TCU on the road earlier this season. The team is playing great football since that Wake loss, but this is definitely a potential trap game with how their offense has struggled on the road at times, and Cal's not that bad of a team. They're bowl-bound with a freshman quarterback who's got a ton of talent, beat Louisville on the road a couple weeks ago, and nearly upset Virginia too. This is probably a tougher matchup, but I'm not in love with this SMU team. 2 touchdowns is too much for me here. I'll take SMU by a score, 30-23. UNLV at Nevada is an interesting game this week. A lot could be on the line for UNLV, and this Nevada team has somehow flipped the switch and won back-to-back games over San Jose State and Wyoming. UNLV enters this game with a chance to make the Mountain West title. It'll need Boise and New Mexico losses to get in, but both teams are in tough matchups this week, so it's definitely possible. Regardless of those games, though, this is one UNLV should handle. The offense is super explosive, and one I don't expect Nevada to be able to stop much. And on the other end, while Nevada has played their best football lately, the entire season still exists, and it's 3-8 for a reason. With the spread at just a touchdown, I like UNLV to win and cover here, even if it's meaningless. But obviously, depending on those games, we may get a better number here Saturday. I'm going 35-20 though. Notre Dame has one final opportunity to impress the playoff committee and strengthen their resume a bit before the college football playoff selection show. A road game at Stanford this week. A big rivalry, but one Notre Dame should absolutely dominate. Stanford's had some great performances, upsetting a couple bad ACC teams this year, but in terms of this Notre Dame matchup, there's not many players starting at Stanford who can confidently say they start at Notre Dame. This team just absolutely decimated Syracuse last week and honestly needs every touchdown they can get to pad those numbers and make the resume a little better. They should be in, but depending on some results and teams sneaking in, they could be sweating. I'd imagine Jeremiah Love makes out another Heisman statement this game too. I think Notre Dame comes out for blood, 49-10. Fresno State's on the road at San Jose State late Saturday night. This San Jose State team has had a pretty tough year, and it's getting even worse now as Walker Egan is hurt and on crutches. So very likely out for this game, and without him, I don't know how you can buy this offense to do much. Fresno's defense is a strength, and they can definitely limit this offense even with him. And without, I just do not like this matchup or this coaching staff to win this game. The team makes so many mistakes to lose. I mean, they just got 50 to Nevada the other week. Fresno's offense is no powerhouse, but they're going to score here, I'd imagine. I've got to roll with not only the better team right now, but a healthier one. I've got Fresno 28-20. It's the final time I get to say this season. The final game of the week is once again a late night game in Hawaii. This time, it's Wyoming coming to town. I actually have really enjoyed watching this Hawaii team this season. It's such a good offense at home, and they've even shown up a couple times on the road this year. But teams consistently struggle to play after a long trip out to the islands, and Hawaii's offense is very solid, led by Ali Hato at quarterback and a couple of really strong weapons. The defense has been a real story as well, especially in Hawaii. They played so much better at home and just destroyed San Diego State there 2 weeks ago. Wyoming does not have any offense at all to really compete here to me, and Hawaii should figure out the defense enough to take this one. So I'm going with a 30-17 final for the Rainbow Warriors. That's it for my Week 14 picks. Let me know your thoughts on any of these games down in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.